proclaim, but he also says, if any nation, if a nation, so any nation. So therefore, I'm not stretching the truth by saying the clay can represent the United States of America. In fact, if you read history, it's almost impossible to read real history, not reconstructed history by those who have rewritten history, who hate America, who want to see America become a socialist, communistic nation where theoretically everybody is equal, but the problem is everybody's equal except for the elites who control everybody. Those who are atheistic and hate God and hate the idea of God and hate the idea of the kind of freedom that America has had, where individuals can have self-determination under God, where we can grow, and has become the greatest nation on earth and the greatest nation in the history of the earth as far as its production and all that has happened. But as we look around, we realize something's happening. If God's hand has been on this nation, something is happening in the clay. And so there's two or three things that potters would tell you, and I'll go back and finish reading the chapter in a moment, or the passage. One thing that can destroy what the potter's doing or cause the clay as it spins faster is if the potter's hand hits a place that is drier than the other. The water has not penetrated a little section, and so it's not pliable, it's not shapeable. It's a lump that when it hits, instead of being molded by the hand, it hits the hand and resists the shaping of the potter. Another thing that can happen is that there can be in that clay a foreign object, something that is not consistent with the nature of the clay. It could be a little straw. It could be some sand. Where I grew up, there were places you could go in we call the red clay hills of Alabama. Now, the red clay on the surface, I learned as a kid, if you stick with it in dry weather, it'll stick to you in wet weather. In fact, you can get stuck on the side of a hill and not even go down because it's so slick. And there were places you could go and dig a little bit, and you could get potter's clay, and you could shape it. What I've learned down here, working in New Orleans as a seminary student, is that when wet weather, if I'll just keep walking, that gumbo mud will build me up and I'll be taller, because it will stick to the bottom of your feet. Or I've learned that you can just sink standing in one place. I had a funeral this week at one of the local cemeteries, and there were so many things going on. But one of the thoughts that came into my mind is the memory back in the 90s when I went to that same local cemetery, and I had I had ordinary, regular size shoes. They weren't high tops. And I was standing there, and it had rained. And after I stood there, before the funeral was over, and of course, gravesides are not very long, I stood there, and by the time I was finished, I had water running into my shoes because I had sunk down. Whatever it is in the clay that mars the clay is foreign to the consistency or the nature of the clay. And has to be removed. Hold that in your mind. So the potter took the clay and remade it. In other words, the process of remaking the clay means that there's something he probably takes out of the clay. It might mean that there's something he applies more moisture to and crushes in order to make it absorbent to the moisture that allows him to shake it. There have been crushings in some of your lives. There have been crushings in my life where I was resistant, where I was stubborn, where there was something foreign, and God had to remake the clay and pull something out to get rid of it in order to reshape something that honored Him. The more resistant, the more stubborn, the more hard, the more dry. You say, Gary, how does a Christian get dry? You get dry by turning your eyes away from Jesus and put them on your own self, and you neglect God's Word, you neglect church, you neglect the preaching of His Word, you neglect prayer, and you just start getting so busy and so busy and oh so busy, and at first you say, well, this is just going to be for a short time, but before you know it, a month is gone. 2 months is gone. 3 months have gone. Or maybe something foreign. You get